James Symond. Jimmy, welcome to Property Insights, mate.
Thank you, Mark.
Fuck, it's been a long time to get here.
Oh, this is a swearing podcast. You can
say
swear on
whatever
this.
you fucking like, mate. This is my podcast. I can say whatever I want, and you can say whatever you like.
That's perfect.
But by the way, for everybody listening to this, okay, this guy drinks coffee outside. Like the last couple of years, I've seen him there like every other day, whatever. So it's taken me literally 2 years to get him in. And nearly I had him here about a month ago, but he got sick. You're okay, recovered? You had the flu?
I'm okay. Thank you very much.
Had the flu?
I had next to pneumonia, which was exciting. And so I thought coming on this podcast at that time was not cool.
No, I definitely don't want to catch that. And I think you just come back from the Gold Coast.
Back from the Gold Coast. It's my little getaway on the Gold Coast.
And Michael, your dad, who's John's brother, one of his brothers.
Well, his oldest brother, yep.
Yep. And your mum and dad live up there. And who was staying up there?
No, my daughter was up there. I've got a little 4.5-year-old daughter named Stella, who's the absolute light of my life. And she was up there, so I had to fly up and get her.
So, Jimmy, CEO of Aussie for how many years now? Well, tell me how it all started. Like, look, let's just talk about it.
Well, Mark, you and I for many years were
combatants.
You could say combatants. I was going to say something similar, which was exciting. And probably ever since COVID. Since I've been downstairs at the Latteria coffee shop downstairs at Darlinghurst. I should get my free coffees now, guys. And so I suppose since COVID, you and I developed a good relationship, which is lovely, which is great.
But did it take for you to have to actually get out of Aussie altogether before you were prepared to do that?
No, not necessarily. I mean, Aussie's an interesting one. I mean, you mentioned how did it all start. I mean, Aussie started in January 1992. I was 19 years of age. My uncle John, Aussie John, rang me up at the time, and he was going through some hard times. And he was going through some very challenging times from his previous business, a commercial lending business. And he rang me up and said, "Jamesy, I've got a business that I'm looking at starting. Can you help me?" And I just didn't, I said, "What's it called?" He said, "Aussie Home Loans." I thought, Aussie Pies, Aussie what? What's Aussie? He said, "We're going to be a non-bank lender." I'm 19 years of age. I didn't know the word mortgage had a letter T in it. And so he said, "Look, if you don't like, come and help me for a week and we'll do this." So, Australia Day in 1992, I was there moving furniture. We started with 3 or 4 people. And, I was there for a week. A week turned into a month turned into near 30 years. And the last 8 years of those 30 years, I was the CEO of the business. And really my focus for predominantly most of the time was to build the sales team, build the distribution channels. And I had a near 30-year journey that was incredible. It was exciting. And I had, we started an industry which arguably we really added to tremendously. When you have John Howard at the time, the Prime Minister of Australia, standing up in Parliament, basically saying if it wasn't for Aussie home loans, everyone would be paying an extra 1 or 2% on their mortgage.
And Peter Costello.
They were amazing times to do that and to be part of a business that had that sort of reach and that sort of impact was incredible. And so we had a wonderful journey, and people like you were on that journey with us in a different brand and a different business with Wizard, and you did a marvelous job
and
of it.
Kinghorn with Rams.
And then John Kinghorn, God bless him, he passed last year with Rams. And so Rams Home Loans, Wizard, Aussie.
I think I came last. So I came in 98.
Yeah.
So you guys came in 92. Aussie came in 92.
So in 92, so Rams was 90, I think around the same time.
It was a little bit after
Aussie
you.
was the same time. And I think Mortgage Choice was around the same time.
Yeah, Mortgage Choice, that's right.
So, but they were a broker at the time. And so we were a non-bank lender until early 2000s.
Explain that concept, because that was a new concept at the time.
So non-bank lending was basically when we sourced finance and sourced monies from second-tier banks, Primary Industry Bank, Adelaide Bank, and Macquarie Bank, which was a big thing for us at the time, where they basically gave us wholesale funds from the marketplace, and we repackaged those funds and lent them out to mums and dads.
As I recall though, Jimmy, could be wrong, but the very first funder you had where you had, I'm not sure if it was a white label or it was funding, but it was PIBA, Primary Industry Bank of Australia. So someone like them, I don't even know who the hell they were, but like Primary Industry Bank of Australia at the time was someone who had no reach. I don't even know if they had a branch. They might have had one branch. So your thesis, yours and John's thesis was, we will build a brand and get Australians to borrow your money when you, Primary Industry Bank of Australia, probably can't because no one's ever heard of you.
That's it. We were very good at distribution. They weren't.
And branding.
So we were very good at branding, as you know, because you did it very well. You know, John used to stand on his soapbox and just give it a go. And at the time, he would attack the banks. He was going very hard for about a decade. You know, we were probably an enemy of the banks, for want of a better word. That changed markedly throughout the years. And but, you know, we used to have advertisements really kicking the teeth in on the banks. And at the time, that was part of our shtick. You know, around early 2000s, next thing you know, David Murray, the head of CBA, decided to go, you know what, I've had enough of this. And he went and lowered the rates of his whole portfolio and the new business by 1% to 2% and just lowered it all. And we looked around and went, hang on, that was our shtick. Our shtick was, sure, we come to you. Our shtick was, we give you great service. But our shtick was, we're cheaper than the banks. Next thing you know, the biggest bank of them all, CBA, decided to, you know, take us on and lower their rates. So for every Australian, and then the other banks followed. And so for every Australian out there, they benefited. And early 2000s, you know, our reach was very strong, but we still had this monoline product and we could just sell so much more. So we decided to have a project to turn the business from a singular product business, a monoline product business, to a mortgage broker, what we call a mortgage broker today. And mortgage broking had been out there for some time. We probably just, you know, commoditized it more for the mums and dads, where every mortgage broker out there at the time said, look, we're a mortgage broker, like Aussie Home Loans, because they knew John, they knew Aussie, and then that probably gave them a sense of comfort. So early 2000s, we turned ourselves into not only selling our product, but everyone's product basically out there because of our reach, because of our distribution, and we got into retail stores. So for the first 10 years, our shtick was, we come to you, we have no stores. But we realized people liked seeing the bricks and mortar. They liked seeing the street fronts. You guys had been doing it for some time, all right? And we decided to roll out high quality stores that looked right, that sounded right, that smelt right, that were consistent. And, you know, we had about 24 stores rolled out. Next thing you know, your old business came for sale. Wizard. Now, you were there, but you had sold out.
Yeah, I'd sold already.
You had hopped on your horse and ridden out with zillions of dollars years before that. So I don't feel sorry for you whatsoever.
I'm glad you got the camera covered up because when you did that, I frowned.
Yeah, good. Yeah, good. So you've got your big purse a long time before that. You were still involved. And then so we decided to have a very late bid at Wizard.
Let's just hold that story because I want to go back to that story because that's a really important story. Because it wasn't a really late bid. I have to tell everyone it was a very fucking cheeky bid, but I will come back to that because for those who are listening, and this is our 100th anniversary, our anniversary of our 100th podcast on this series, and so I want to actually spend a little bit more time with you, or more time with you than I normally spend with anybody. And because we're mates, it's probably a bit more fun too. And I'm no disrespect to previous guests on the show. For those who don't understand, there was a concept in the United States called a non-bank financial institution, an NBFI, which is sort of what Aussie was the first organisation, as far as I remember, was the first organisation to do that. And you mentioned, you know, originally you had some arrangements with people like Primary Industry Bank of Australia, but your real big relationship was with Macquarie Bank. Mm-hmm. Macquarie Bank had a thing called Puma, which was a securitisation vehicle. It's a complicated thing, but like it's actually much more complicated these days, but it was a complicated thing back in those days. Somehow, I'd like to know how Macquarie Bank became interested in you guys. Was that an approach by your organisation to them, or did they approach you?
Macquarie Bank and the funding from Macquarie Bank and through Puma was probably when we started to explode. And to be perfectly honest, we started to become profitable because these are annuity businesses. For many years, as you know, you bleed money, you lose money. And so Macquarie Bank and through Puma, John had deep relationships with people in Macquarie, with Bill Moss, with Alan Moss, Tony Gill, Frank Gannis, and our old Frank Gannis. And hi, Frank. And these people were extremely supportive. Tony Gill was, he's a very clever dude. And we decided to securitize from the marketplace zillions of dollars. Macquarie did it efficiently, effectively, very well.
Typical of Macquarie.
Typical of Macquarie. Macquarie were a very, very good partner.
Definitely one of the smartest banks, particularly in this territory.
Absolutely. And so with that and with those relationships and, we developed a program together. And we really took on the big banks head on.
Just so explain it though, Jimmy, so Puma and you guys together would go out to the market. Mm-hmm. You weren't raising money from your normal depositors, which normally put money on deposit with the bank, which is where banks normally fund their mortgages from. They borrow short and lend long.
Yep.
What was happening was you were going to the markets and borrowing long from institutions. And they would put up literally billions of dollars.
Yep.
And then you would take that, you would turn that into small amounts of 250, 350, 500, whatever it happened to be. And then your borrower, people who borrow from you, would pay you interest and principal. And then you guys would pay back to the institutions principal and interest. And you just hold on to a little bit in the middle.
We'd only make a little bit of billions and billions and billions of dollars.
Yeah.
So Macquarie were the smartest, the sharpest in the day of doing that. And they knew how to do it well. So they got it and we could sell it.
Yeah.
And therefore it was a good partnership.
But what they weren't very good at, and they're much better at today, Macquarie, but they weren't very good at the branding part. So what Aussie was a genius for was branding. And if I could just maybe wind it back a little bit, the Will Save You strapline, do you sort of remember where they came from? How did they come about?
Sure. John's, at Aussie, Will Save You.
You do that well, actually.
They do it well?
Yeah.
That actually came from John. Even the logo, we had a first logo. You wouldn't know this, but we had a first logo and it was a technical, horrible Australian home loans and John didn't like it. So I think literally John re-scribbled what the new logo should look like and just said, let's just call it Aussie, will you? It makes more sense to the mums and dads. John always had a great smell for the mums and dads and what they wanted. And then literally, John did a commercial in the day. This was 25 years ago for us.
Normal.
For us, it was a big deal doing a commercial. John stood behind a desk with the Australian flag in front of him, with his Coca-Cola thick black glasses on, and stood there and said, look, you've worked hard for your money, so why give it to the banks? I'm asking you to go to the bank, ask for a better deal, and if not, give Aussie a call on 13 13 33 at Aussie. We'll save you. It was all about, that's actually all came from John.
But because I always found it fascinating. I thought a lot about it, a lot, because I saw it on TV, the ads, and you ran great TV campaigns.
Yep.
And of course, 60 Minutes picked up on it too in terms of how,
Yep.
I remember that big Congo line of small Aussie home loans, mobile lender cars in the 60 Minutes program.
Yeah.
And I wasn't around at that time, or Wizard wasn't, but I was fascinated by your mode of distribution, and we'll talk about that in a second. But when Aussie said, we'll save you, actually, and then in John's voice, the question I used to always ask myself, why it was so fascinating, I think, is that people would attribute to your saying what they thought they needed to be saved from, and everybody needs to be saved from something different. Save you from what? Save you from the banks. We'll save you, in other words, you'll pay less over time. We'll save you interest. We'll save you repayments. We'll save you from your own demise. But it was and I don't know, but do you think it was, as John knew, as how brilliant that strapline was? It's still brilliant today, by the way. They should use it. But do you think everybody understood how brilliant that would end up being at the time?
So we had that strapline for many years, and we loved it. And then we'd go through various marketing agencies, and we would spend a lot of money each year on marketing, advertising, and as you know, and commercials and so forth. And then a lot of these external agencies always wanted to move us on. So, we'll save you. That's old news. That's old hat. So then we had other strap lines that they, pushed us to use, all the right home loans under the one roof, and, a whole bunch of stuff. None of it, when we went away from We'll Save You, none of it worked. We went back to We'll Save You several years ago, and because of the consumers loved it, they wanted it. We went back to We'll Save You again, and it worked. And the phones just kept ringing like that.
Yeah, because it means a lot to people.
It means a lot. There's not many times in the vernacular that you can have a company that is associated with a tagline. There's not many. And Aussie.
NRMA Help is a good example.
Right, perfect example. And Aussie, We'll Save You was one of those strap lines. So, they probably should use it today. Not, that's their business. But they probably should use it today. It's just so strong. But it's also very linked with John. It's also very linked with Aussie John, I guess. But it was very important for us to have that.
So, and then do you remember because in those days, if you could get on 60 Minutes, that is the greatest free kick of all time. And it was TV was much more popular in those days, and 60 Minutes was it was a destination or an appointment on a Sunday night. We all had an appointment with 60 Minutes on a Sunday night. For that to be on 60 Minutes, do you remember that event? And for
John would get press that you wouldn't believe, and he was very likable. The press liked him, happy, fatty, whatever. John, God bless you, I'm the same. But he was very knowledgeable. He had changed the game. He was always open 24/7 to press, and we were doing something that was pretty wonderful. And I remember the days of 60 Minutes when we got on 60 Minutes. And for us, that was a big deal.
Oh, my God.
God. And, I think the same program you had, God bless him, Rifkin on there as well. I think Renee Rifkin was on there. It's amazing how many people were trying to get into the mortgage industry at the time. They looked at people like John, looked at people like you, looked at people and went, oh, no, if they can make a buck, I can make a buck. So everyone was trying to jump in, whether it was Rifkin, Adler, whatever. Anyway, so and trying to
because it was FAO home loans.
That's right. But 9 out of 10 of them went by the wayside. It's a tough business. It's
actually Jimmy Chiaris, who's was a wizard guy in Elwood, which became your Aussie guy in Elwood, was an FAO home loans guy.
Is that right?
That's where I got him from.
Okay.
So when they sort of went down a little bit, and I got Jimmy from there.
Yeah, he's a lovely man. Jim and Maria, lovely people.
Yeah,
they're still there.
And the kids. I think Anthony runs it, as I recall.
They're all good people.
But what did you understand the enormity, the free kick you got from this?
We did, because the next day the phones went off the hook and then stayed off the hook. It took us to another level and we stayed there. And we had different events throughout our history in 30 years that would take us to another level and then stay there, take us to another level and stay there. And we just had to, John would make it rain, and then I'd have to have the team to make sure we captured the rain. I'd have to no good making it rain or throwing the ball without a catcher's mitt.
Yeah.
So we end up developing a really strong catcher's mitt. And through those retail stores, which when I exited the business a few years ago, we had 220 of those stores and 1,000 brokers on the ground. We developed a very strong retail model, settling many billions a month.
So if you went back to if we just stop at the 60 Minutes program, prior to that though, John was. Not only did he have his famous strap line, but one of the things you guys did with a lot of courage, and it's sort of interesting when I think about it, because actually the fact that you were knocking the banks, I mean, John did not hold back. I mean, it was no holds barred. He ripped the banks pretty hard, but at the same time, effectively you were sort of helping Macquarie, who was one of the banks, was helping you raise the money to lend to Australians that actually competed with the banks. It was, and by the way, Prime Minister Bank of Australia was a bank.
Yeah.
Did you ever worry together? Like, did you ever sit down and think, oh, hang on, we're just got to be a bit careful here, chill out a little bit because we're ripping the banks pretty hard. They might come after us. Was there ever a thought?
So John was always very calculated. John was always, even though he'd rip the banks, he'd say it with a laugh or he was very respectful. But we had the banks at the time to such a degree where even I remember, I think it was in Campbelltown or somewhere out there, one of the major banks, I won't say Westpac's name, had on their front of their store literally derogatory remarks about Aussie painted on the front of the store, where the local bank manager decided to have a brain explosion and do that. I mean, you don't acknowledge your competitors in that way there. You don't, I'd never spoke about competitors with my team, ever. You know what? I ran my own race and I ran really hard, and here's Westpac at the time putting, painting on there. Good for us, bad for silly for them. So we had taken them right to the edge of being such a pain, and that's where David Murray lowered the rates.
I remember I think that was in February, as I recall it. Yep. He lowered his interest rate to 6.99 from everybody else's in the sevens, had a 7 in front of it, and it was February 1999.
It was late 90s, yeah.
Yeah, and it was off the back of the second tranche of CBA being listed. So CBA prior to that period was a government-owned business, and then the government listed half, and then the government owned half, and then they listed the second half. And the second half was listed towards the end of 98. And in 99, they launched in February 99 this 6.99 rate. Because I remember that. When I saw it, I went, wow, that's 6.99. That's amazing. And my business had only just started up, Wizard, and it was 98. I started up in 98, effectively, or in full throttle 98. And what I did when David Murray launched that 6.99 product, I launched a product the next day of 6.98. And I remember on the front page of the Fin Review, it said Wizard leads with magic rate. And my game was basically, because you guys were the incumbents, you were the big guys, and because you launched.
But you were, can I say, a very, very clever fast follower.
Well, because what I did was
very clever, and there's nothing wrong with that. And it used to piss me off.
I know it did.
Piss me off. We'd launch an alarm system. Next thing you know, next day, and by the way, we got one of those.
Yeah.
What do you mean you got one of those? We'd launch whatever. Next thing you know, it just pissed me off. And sorry, you said this was a swearing podcast.
You can say what you like.
And I would say to John, this guy Bouris, and John would, God bless John, Jamesy, who cares? Don't worry about him.
That's exactly what he would sound like.
Worry about your own race. Worry about focusing on your own goal. Who cares? Good. More competition's better. Yeah, competition is the big banks. They have 80, 90% of the share. That's your competition. John would never, he'd never even genuinely ever acknowledge a competitor in himself. He'd just go, oh, that's great. Good on you.
And what did you learn from that, though? Because I think that's a really important point.
I think John just helped me to think very big at a young age.
Yeah.
Just think big, right? Think of the bigger picture. Don't get stuck in the minutiae, all right? Think big.
Do the minutiae, but don't get stuck.
Sure, get people to worry about the minutiae, but just think larger. My grandmother, John's mother, was always big on, I remember John, God bless him, built a big boat and blah, blah, blah. It was lovely. And on the big boat in the staircase, there was a beautiful journey of John's life with his parents and his family, and that with a quote from my grandmother. And it was always, she used to always say to Johnny and us, but she was always to say to Johnny, you know what? Johnny, always think big. Think big and double it again.
Really?
And this was my 89-year-old grandmother that said that all her life. And she was 4 foot tall, but she had the presence of a 10-foot giant in our family. And that's how we always were. We always were at Aussie, and we were led by that. And that's how I've been built, because that's how he was brought up, to think big, double it and double it again, and that's exactly how we approached everything.
Yeah, because I used to stand back and look at you guys, and I used to think, my God, they're big thinkers. I mean, I did. And you're right. What I did with CBA is exactly what I did with you guys. I would just say, well, I'm going to let them lead, and I'm just going to come clip off the back. So no matter what you did, and by the way, you guys were very good at announcing something that you were going to do.
but also,
then I would announce it too.
Sure, and so you could pivot, and that's a really important lesson, to be able to pivot like you used to pivot was really important. And there would have been a stage where you wouldn't have been able to pivot as quickly, as fast, and that would have pissed you off. You know, whether it was when GE bought into you or whatever.
When I got bigger.
That's right.
And I had bigger shareholders.
That's right. And all of a sudden, when you're not making much money or any money and you got not much to lose, all of a sudden, you know, you're running a bigger business and a lot of people reliant upon you and you're making a buck and all the rest of it. You've got to think 3 times before you do something. But, you know, in terms of, you know, that's something that you did very well, this whole pivot business and this fast follower. And I remember Steve Jobs used to say, you know, being a fast follower is what Apple used to be. You know, you look at Apple's products and so forth. They just did it better, faster, sharper. They didn't invent the phone. They didn't invent software. They didn't invent the computer. They just did it better.
So you guys developed a lot of really good, and this is right in your territory, James Simon's territory. You guys developed, I would consider to be some of the best mortgage brokers, not necessarily brokers, but mortgage guys as salespeople in the country by far. And some of those guys broke away, set up their own businesses, as we both know, some of those individuals. And to some extent, you started the careers. And
we would have been
the
largest trainer of mortgage brokers in the country for 20 years.
By far.
You know, by a long shot. We were very, very strong on, you know, if we don't train them, look, if we don't train them, they'll stay. If we do train them, they may leave. But we wanted the best outcome for the customers. And we wanted this, I mean, mortgage broking at the time what was mortgage broking? Yeehaw, it was Cowboy City. With respect, it was.
No, totally.
And so we wanted to turn butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers into professional mortgage brokers, professional salespeople. And that's exactly what we did. So we had not hundreds, but thousands of mortgage brokers that went through our hands. Now, that's good and bad. For the first probably 10 years, we didn't have the models in which to hold on to those brokers. Not until we started retail, where they could buy into the brand, buy into a franchise, have a lot more commission, a lot more control, were we able to keep those brokers truly long-term. But look, proudly, I look around the whole industry and there are so many ex-Aussie people that you can only be proud of it. There are so many really good people and we can only wish them well.
Yeah. So you guys instinctively were really good at working out what consumers want. You mentioned about John, you know, he had a good read on people, you know, and the Aussie will save you. That's a good read on your audience, but that's instinctive. Probably not even well researched. It's more an instinct that he had. In terms of being able to train brokers to be really good at what they do, in other words, to be able to close a deal. It's no good getting all the inquiry. You can't close a deal. And you had good instincts on, you know, and you had a bit of shit in you too. Like you were prepared to, you know, push people around to get the outcomes. I mean, because it's, you know, it's not just about saying, "Oh, would you like to join us?" and go for your life. You know, you have to drive them to deliver. And you have to be able to push people.
Do I look like someone who could push anyone around?
Yes, you had a lot of shit in you, right? So like you, and you know, you had a reputation as being hard.
Come on.
No, that's the truth, James. Come on. But doesn't, you have mellowed, to be honest with you. It's actually, since you've been married, I think you're a much nicer person. And your wife would say the same thing. No, but I'm only joking. But
Mark, we used to run hundreds and hundreds of commission-only mortgage brokers.
And you have to be tough on them.
And if I'm not, you know, focused, and if I'm not hard, and if I don't get from them what I give to them as well, we gave a lot, right? We would give our heart, our soul, our brand, our leads, our office. We gave everything, and so we'd expect back. And so we had so many successful brokers, $1 million, $2 million, $3 million earning per annum brokers, which was sort of unheard of, you know, and that took, you know, people used to say, John used to hit high, James used to hit low. I'm not sure if that's a good thing to say or bad, but the combination worked very, very well. He focused very much, you know, on the business, but very much on marketing. And I focused on the business, of course, but very much on sales. And that combination for nearly 30 years worked very, very well. And we loved the business. We just loved it.
What is it about to be a good mortgage broker? To be good in the mortgage industry, not even just as a broker, but to be good in the mortgage industry, what's the mindset? I mean, apart from being, work hard and all that sort of stuff, but what's the mindset about it?
Yeah, I mean, look, you and I have had brilliant mortgage brokers, and you look at some of their history, and a lot of it, there's very little rhyme and reason. You know, we've had ex-customs agents be number one brokers. We've had ex-policemen, we've had ex-bankers, we've had and I think at the end of the day, you have to be resilient. You have to be disciplined and bloody well want to do this. This is like a commission-only job. You're running your own business. You don't get out in the morning, you don't eat. Simple as that. And you've got to love the customer. I know it sounds corny, but you have to love the customer. You're seeing dozens of new customers every week, every month. And if you don't love the interaction, choose another industry. Go and work, for the government. But it's just, you've got to love the customer. But, this is a hard business, and it's not a hard business. There's, two ways to look at it. If you follow the process, if you love the customer, and if you just bloody work hard. I mean, being a mortgage broker is morning, noon and night, 7 days a week. There's no such thing as 9 to 5. Mums and dads want to see you after hours, on the weekends. Real estate agents and auctions and all that on the weekends. So being a mortgage broker is not, it's a life choice. It's not just a job. So it's there's no, you've got to have those focuses.
So because the mindset is around, and what I observe from you guys as well, with the mindset, because I've never been a mortgage broker, and whereas John was.
So I was a mortgage broker for 18 months.
So you've done it physically.
I've done it. And look, I was a 21-year-old kid looking back, driving out in Campbelltown. John sent me out to Campbelltown, Camden, Narellan, all the rest of it. Hard areas. I'm 21 and I'm sitting in mums and dads' homes flogging a mortgage, and Aussie who? We had our scripts, we had our spiels, we had this, and it'd be 10, 11 o'clock at night. There wasn't sat nav in those days. I'm here and I can't read a map. I'd be the world's most profitable taxi driver because I'd get lost all the time. And so here I am ringing my parents at 11 o'clock at night saying, can you help me get home? 21 years of age, and I'd play a game of turning off my headlights. And there'd all be black around me. It felt like, it was just in the forest. I mean, these were tough times. And those 18 months that I was a mortgage broker taught me so much. Mate, it's hard stuff. You want to go and sit and, the experiences. I've walked into customers' homes where on purpose, the husband or wife answers the door naked and they wanted to be interviewed naked for a mortgage. I know, weird stuff. And obviously I didn't play, but I mean, and I just left. But, people live unusual lives as well. I mean, it's a real tapestry.
It's but there's an intimacy there though, because you're going into their home.
It is, that's where, we get to this, but it's like on the online business. Everyone wants to go online. Everyone wants to go. And there is a certain segment of the marketplace that enjoys that. But it's very small. The majority of the cases, if I can get one of my guys or me and get face to face with the customer, with you, I'll take you off the market. It won't blink. You won't be going to a computer and online, or I'll take you out of the market. Sales is all about trust. Number 1, number 2, and number 3. And within a short amount of time, I will build trust with you where you won't go anywhere else. Sorry, I keep hitting your microphone.
But when you say, that's very interesting. Yeah, trust to me is about, when I think about who do I trust the most, I trust my family. And the reason I trust my family is because I know them the best. They're the most familiar people in the world to me because I grew up with them. I know what to expect, what the outcomes are. Do you think that the reason why Aussie was so successful at, as you put it, taking them off the market, in other words, getting them off the street, getting that borrower off the street and committed to you, and if you're doing that through trust, is that because they really trusted this sentiment around the brand?
Well, first of all, we had created this trusted household brand. So number 1, the consumers already had the expectation that they were going to trust us as long as we followed through. And then 9.9 times out of 10, we would follow through. So the brand number 1 was an extraordinarily trusted household brand. John was an extraordinarily trusted figurehead. And then the brokers that would go and meet with the customers face to face, they just had to emulate that. They just had to follow through on that.
Turn up on time,
have knowledge. They need to be the bearer of knowledge.
And be polite, well-mannered.
And every customer, and that's where the online bit is challenging, every customer has 100 nuances within their scope, within their history, within, oh, by the way, I need this. It's a little bit confusing. They talk about vanilla deals. I still haven't seen what a vanilla deal is. And so
the online market, though, relies on vanilla deals.
That's right. So, and by the way, the online marketplace, I still don't know a single mortgage broker in Australia who's so-called online without it being fully, human intervention.
At the back end.
At the back end.
As soon as you get off the online, there's someone peddling away behind the scenes.
So I don't know a mortgage broker. Maybe there's singular or non-bank lenders or a bank that has a monoline product, a different story. I don't know a mortgage broker that is fully online without it having absolute human intervention as soon as you call up or as soon as you actually submit your form over the net.
But do you think, James, that is an Australian thing? Do you think Australian borrowers or Australian consumers really prefer to have an interaction with somebody who can actually do the hard work for them?
Look, you can't, for example, the US marketplace and the Australian marketplace is chalk and cheese. I've been over there a zillion times. We used to go to the conferences, John and I, from 92 in San Francisco to all the rest of it. And we got better than them. We got better than them. We got more profitable than them. We got bigger than them. And it's a different, you look at online mortgage places like in the States, Rocket Mortgages, huge, and Dan, who's an old mate, started that many years ago, made a lot of money out of that, let me tell you. And but it's a different marketplace. Even simple things like the lenders and the banks in the States have exactly the same application form. The same. Over here, even the application form is totally different. They can't get their act together. So there is a zillion nuances in an online application, a zillion nuances of every customer. And if I can get someone face-to-face with you to take you off the marketplace, they will do it and they won't think twice and they won't speak to a competitor.
So how much of that is about, how much is likability? I mean, today likability, because on social media, likability is the thing where, we're all putting likes up everywhere.
If a customer doesn't like you, they won't go with you.
Right. So
full stop.
How did you train your thousands of brokers, many thousands of brokers over a long period of time? How did you train them about how to become liked by the consumer? Because, there'll be mortgage brokers listening to this. How do you do it?
Totally agree. Look, the customer can like you. The customer's not going to deal with someone if they don't like them. And like comes from a whole bunch of stuff, including trust. And I can show you some mortgage brokers that are so successful and they have the personality of a wet rag, okay?
So it's not about personality.
They follow process,
right? And
they do what they say they said they would do. They're full of quality knowledge. They don't have to be the center of attention, So personalities can range. You've just got to have your shtick. You've just got to have, how many people do we know that are a font of knowledge that we would go to for advice that really we wouldn't take out to dinner or lunch because it would be boring as hell? It doesn't mean they've got to be, I've got to have sing and dance.
Don't have to be entertainers or whatever.
No, So
like is about trust, punctuality, service.
You have to add value to the consumer.
Yeah.
And these are points, trust, likability, service, knowledge. These are all points that add value where the consumer says to themselves, I can't do this without you.
I want to fast forward. You guys went and bought the Wizard business, and I just quickly want to talk about that because for many, many years both of you were acting very instinctively. The business was Aussie was a very instinctive business, but you followed through on all the things you just talked about in terms of being able to sell, trust, likability, processes, service, processes, etc. But then you got quite strategic, and the decision to buy from GE off the back of the global financial crisis, because GE had to get out of the Wizard business in 2008, the end of 2008. And I know this for a fact because I was the chairman of the business at the time. We were dealing with NAB. And we've been dealing with NAB to buy this business under Armoured for about 7 months. Matt Lawler was running the process for NAB, and Matt's now at AMP. And I get a phone call about 5 days before Christmas Eve in 2008. I think Christmas Eve was on a Friday that year. Might have been 10 days that you guys wanted to have a bid, and you weren't going to do any due diligence. Hopefully I'm not misrepresenting anything. That you just wanted the business. You wanted the brand. You wanted the shops. But you didn't want the book. You weren't interested in G's book or the old wizard book. G could keep that because you had another plan. I didn't know about the other plan at the time, but you didn't want the book. You just wanted the branches, the branch owners, the franchises, and you wanted to convert them into Aussie Home Loans branches. So you didn't need to do any due diligence. And as I recall, I got a call. Would I support it? I said, of course I would. You know, I'm very happy about that because I didn't own the business anyway. And I actually thought it was a better place for you to go, for the wizard guys to go. Within, I don't know, 6-7 business days, what NAB had been working on for like 7 months, you guys closed the deal. Can you take me through it?
So we heard your business was for sale, and the first reaction was good on them, great. Then we heard the price, and then we heard NAB was the singular buyer at the time. I knew your business better than most, and I knew most of the businesses out there better than most. I was deep for a long time. And so I basically did my own DD within 3 seconds. And with the price that was put to us, we very quickly worked out with our head of strategy, David, our head of strategy at the time, that this could be very interesting for us. The book piece, CBA at the time, who were a shareholder at the time and ended up owning the business.
Shareholder of Aussie, yeah.
Of Aussie, said, we'll take that book and we'll spin it around and do what they do with it. And I said, I'll take the branches and I will retrain, resculpture, relook, refeel, and turn them into Aussie stores. We never called our places branches. We called them stores. Yeah. And I was big on, I didn't want to have anything to do with what a bank look and feel was like. And banks called their places branches. Apple called theirs stores and I called mine stores. I thought that was a more progressive term. So even today, I mean, the word branch to me meant, with respect, fat, lazy bank. And I like the word store. And so we end up having an initial meeting, as you know, with a few of us, including John, and you were in that room. And literally, you know, the person that, like John, literally, and John didn't know you well, but knew of you for many, many years. And John, like, it really was, I feel for the poor bastard having to sit through that, you know, blah, blah, blah. I'd hate doing that. Oh, my God, isn't that, gee, you're like punny. I mean, John felt sorry for you. At the time, I just said, John, as long as we get a good deal, let's get a good deal. So then we walked away from that meeting. We regrouped. We put in, I think, an offer, and they've just said, look, forget it. But they've come back to us and said, look, you know, if you reached a little further, we'd probably do the deal. How fast can you write out the check, so to speak? And we said, we'll write out a check in full within how many minutes you got. And so literally we got on the phones to the deal makers at the time and said, look, you know, we'll do X, Y, Z, and we'll act very, very fast, and we'll run right now and sort of go to the ATM for you. And they said, look, NAB are going to close, like literally imminently. And if you can do it, and if you can act, this is one of these pivot bits, if you can act real quick, which what we could do, you can have it. And that's what we did. So
Christmas Eve,
2008. That's right. Christmas Eve, 2008. We end up literally running down. We did the deal. And then I remember ringing up Matt or Ahmed or one of them and saying to them, listen, stop. And they said, James, I'm just running. I'm on the way to a meeting. And I said, I know what the meeting's about. Can I tell you what the meeting's about before you go into it? And it was Matt or Ahmed or one of them said, you've bought Wizard. And I said, yes. And then I think they just hung up on the phone. And You know, I don't think I've spoken to Ahmed ever since, but
he was pretty upset, let me tell you, because he rang me on the Monday.
Yeah, too bad, so sad. You know what? It's business, and that's life in business.
Up high, down low, too slow.
That's right. Too slow. Too bad, so sad. That's right.
And then they thought they had it.
And so that's right. They thought it was in the bag. You know, never think it's in the bag. Let me tell you.
Until the money's paid.
And next thing you know, we spent the next 3 months, as you know, on the road going around to the various stores. We went and first of all, we gave state-by-state presentations, and you were there.
I went
and
on
you were
those.
sick as a dog from memory.
I caught whooping cough.
That's it. You were sick as a dog, and you were a competitor still, and there wasn't much love there at the time, and you held yourself very, very well. Now, you probably went back to your room or went home and said, look at these assholes. However, you held yourself really well. And John and I were so impressed. We went, shit, you gave us a different light as to what you were, and which was very cool. And then I went around to virtually every single Wizard branch at the time, introduced myself. Oh my God, out of 160 or 150 branches, I think 99 came across, and the others either didn't want to come across or we said, see you later. Their attitude was disgusting, the culture, because they just want to come across.
They didn't want to get Aussie.
They're Aussie, they're competitor. Yeah. Meanwhile, it was an amazing deal, let me tell you. Anyone who came across it was a stoker of a deal.
For them.
Oh, yeah. I paid for redoing their branch to an Aussie store. I paid for training. I gave them $1 zillion books for them to refund. It was all a gimme. Like, it was an amazing deal.
They never made so much money for about a 2-year period.
They cut their nose to spite their faces, the people that didn't come across. Yeah. Put that aside. And I would go to some of the Wizard branches, and some of them had, it was strikingly hot in Melbourne, 40-degree day, and I was with State Manager Paul Chesterman, and at the time, and we're going just introducing, meet and greet, hi. Some of them would turn their air conditioning systems off because they wanted to be sweat, and I would walk, and I mean, some of them were sitting at the back of their offices with their feet on their desks, smoking a cigarette, and I'd walk in and go, you're out of here, bye, F off. And they'd go, what do you mean? Fuck off. And that's where you talk about hard, Don't let the smile fool you.
Yeah, but I think that was, to be honest with you, was the appropriate thing to do as the buyer. Yeah. I mean, if they're not going to play ball, they're not going to play ball.
See you later.
So if then everything sort of just went along swimmingly, then of course you guys ultimately both of you exited the business in which year? In it? 2000 and what?
So CBA bought part of the business.
And that was in 2008.
Ralph Norris rang up John.
Yep.
And said, John saw he'd never sell to a bank, ever. In fact, but in 2008...
Ralph Norris is CBA.
Ralph Norris, CEO of CBA, lovely man. And he rang John and said, John, let's have a coffee. And he put to John, you're this, you're that, love the brand, we're interested in buying a share. And at the time, John could see the vision, and John could see how, this could be a good thing. So CBA bought into the business and had a very long tail of end up escalating to buying 100% of the business. And CBA, for all their faults, so to speak, were actually a wonderful partner. They were a very, very strong partner.
Very smart.
They're very smart. They left us alone. You had Ralph Norris as a CEO. You had Ian Rev, who did the deal at the time. He was the deal maker.
Yep.
End up becoming CEO. Wonderful. And then you had Matt Common. I mean, these are three very clever people who are all of them were on the board at one stage of Aussie. They knew the business intimately. And CBA, I'd love to bag out the big banks, but they were great partners. They really were. We were sad when CBA, probably didn't let us buy the business back, and they merged with a technology business, and that was a bit sad, and that's when John and I formally exited the business. But CBA were great partners.
James, if I was asked you just two questions, what's your best memory and your worst memory of Aussie?
The best memory, you know what? The tougher the time, the better the memory. We had some tough times, like we just did. And then we had, where money was, what money? The first 7 years, we bled from the eyeballs. Annuity business. We made no money. It was hard.
18 months, 2 years, nothing.
No, for 7 years, not 18 months.
No, but I mean, years. Every loan, you're paying it out. And as you got bigger, you're paying it out more and more.
Out. So there were times there we're going, what are we doing? And John always had the big vision, and always was very focused. And it was those times building the business. I lived in Brisbane for 9 months. I lived in Melbourne for 9 months. And so I would be running around building the business and opening stores and they were, looking back, they were fun times. In fact, sort of reaching, you never get to the top of the mountain, but getting near the top of the mountain, it wasn't as much fun. So those tougher times were fun. It was fun having, we used to get front page of the newspapers, which was amazing. And so when the newspaper would come out 2:00 in the morning, I'd be out, with my mates having a night out or whatever, get the newspaper with the front page of Aussie on there. And then I'd be buzzing John's doorbell at his home at 2:00 in the morning saying, look, we're on the door. And John would, and we were so in love and entrenched with the business. And they were fun times. The harder times, what was the bad memories? I suppose one tough memory is that you're building the business at any one time with a lot of people and some really close people to you that are on the payroll. And you end up forging really nice, deep relationships with these people. And then you forget that they're not family. They're not your son, your brother, your mother, your father, your cousin. They're people that work with you and for you. And one day they leave and they just say, thank you very much. Thank you for your friendship. Thank you for and I'm leaving. I'm now going to work somewhere else. So it's sort of sad as you look at it going, you're watching these people come and go, that you sort of give your life to them and you work with them and you try to make sure they're okay, they're happy, and then they move on. So that's always a harder thing when you take your business so passionately.
And personally.
Personally, of course. So that's always a harder thing. But there was never something that we couldn't conquer. Sure, the Royal Commission was tough. Sure, when you'd get a bad run in a broker or it's tough. But you know what? It's just all part of business. You have the systems and processes and the people to counteract that. So I honestly can say within 30 years, nearly 30 years, there was never a time that I didn't love the business, and I'm not one of these people saying do what you love. I never wanted to go into mortgage broking. I never went to school and went, I want to be a mortgage broker. Didn't know what one was. But I found something that I was very good at, and you learn to love what you're very good at.
If I could just move along, because if you don't mind me talking about this for a second, it's sort of known within the industry that you got on well a couple of years back there. And I remember seeing you, I had lunch with you, maybe, I can't remember if it was before or after COVID or during COVID, but I got a shock when I saw you. Because you used to be a fairly big, robust guy. And
I was fat, was I?
No,
that's your way of saying I was fat.
No, John was a bit overweight, but you weren't. You were just a big young guy. You're a big guy. You're a big guy, but you're structurally a little bit fat. And but I remember that you came in to see me, and you had tubes, and we had lunch at in the city.
That's right.
And not a shock. You want to quickly tell us what happened?
Oh, look, I mean that. That was certainly life-changing. I've been going through a few life-changing moments in the last 6-7 years. It's amazing. I mean, here I am. I mean, look, without speaking too out of school, I'm in Europe and it's my uncle's 70th birthday. We're on the back of a boat. I'm with my fiance. I'm looking at her saying, aren't things good? Aren't things well? And that was probably the stupidest thing I could have ever said. Next thing you know, literally, 2 months later, I'm walking down George Street in the city and I'm losing breath and I couldn't breathe. And I'm just in front of the Ivy building at the time, a good mate of mine owns. And I'm here and I had to sit on a little bollard and I'm in my suit. I've come from lunch. I couldn't breathe. So the next morning I went to the doctors and they said, look, there's something wrong. We don't know what it is. They put me in, went to emergency. And within 2 hours, they've said, listen, we're not sure, it's the heart, lung, kidney. But one thing we do know is that you have a thing called multiple myeloma, which is bone marrow cancer. I said, what? What are you talking about? What do you mean? They said, we've caught it early, we think, but you've got bone marrow cancer. And within 24 hours, I'm sitting down with the oncologist and within the kidney specialist, where they're telling myself and my fiance that I might have 6 to 10 weeks to live, and that's it. And I need to get my affairs in order. Whew,
Age?
Mate, this was
41.
This was what? So this was 6 years ago, 6.5 years ago. I'm 52 today. I was 45, 46. And this is crazy. This is crazy. So here my wife and I have gone home going, well, and I'm very pragmatic. I've gone, well, that's the end of the journey. Let's get the lawyers in. Let's get da-da-da, which we did. And then about 4 days later, they rang me up and they said, listen, come in about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, come in tomorrow morning. And here we are going to bed each night going, oh, well, that's it for James. See you later. And so the next morning we went in and the doctor said, look, good news. We think we can solve a number of this. We think we've got a plan. And we think that, this 6 to 10 weeks, might be 6 to 10 years, which has ultimately turned out actually to be, a lot longer than that. And I said to the doctors, I said, mate, why couldn't you have told me on the phone at 3 p.m? There's good news. Here we are, even that night going in the next day, where each night we're teary, where my wife's beside herself. And so I've been on a journey for 6.5 years.
Is it full remission now?
No, you never get into full remission with multiple myeloma. I've been through hell and back. I certainly recall you need kidney work or something. I've had my kidneys and I have dialysis and I have this and I've got a nurse at home. I've got it all set up, right? So I can run my life where it's seamless. But I had a bone marrow transfer, which is extraordinary. They take bone marrow and out of your body, spin it, clean it, put it back. But you spend 2.5 weeks in St. Vincent's Hospital in a sealed room, in a sealed floor where no one can visit you because you'll die. I went in with a young girl and she was another patient. And I think she was 21, 22 years of age. And I came out by myself.
Wow.
She didn't come out. So it is a huge process. And so we just threw everything at it. And I remember at the time, and I hope he doesn't mind me speaking out of school. One thing with Aussie in 30 years is that our networks are extraordinary. And I'm very grateful of that. Whether it's meeting King Charles or Barack Obama, we've been privileged to have met them all. And one person that we became good mates with is Andrew Forrest. And I have a big soft spot for Andrew. And Andrew rang me up and he said, son, he said, I believe you're sick. And I said, yeah, look, I am, Andrew. He said, okay, what do you got? All right, we'll solve this. I'm on a plane and I'll be back in 3 days. Stay by the phone in a few days' time. I'll call you. Next thing you know, I'm in a board meeting and my assistant walks in and she said, look, Mr. Forrest is on the phone to you. And I said, look, I'm in a board meeting, Nicole, And she said, he said you'd say that. He said he doesn't care. I went, okay, and John's there. John said, go and speak to Andrew, will you? So I walked in and spoke to Andrew. Jimmy! I said, hi, Andrew. And he said, look, I'm just with Bill and Jennifer or whatever he said. And he said, now these people are going to help you. And Bill said, hi, James, how are you? American accent. And this Jennifer's, hi, James, da-da-da. Anyway, so they put me on to the CEO of Dana-Farber, which is the hospital owned by Harvard. And so the CEO then put me on to the world's foremost expert in multiple myeloma, who's the loveliest guy, and we flew him out to Australia, along with a whole bunch of different drugs that Australia has never seen before, including one called daratumumab, which a good mate of mine, Josh Frydenberg and Greg Hunt, helped us put it on the PBS for everyone.
Josh Frydenberg being the treasurer?
Yeah, the ex-treasurer, I'm sorry. So that really helped. But interestingly enough, and I'm not sure whether I should say this, but I will, Bill and Jennifer, Andrew rings me up about 20 minutes later and says, how's that? The things I do for you. He said, that only cost me 400 million. So what are you talking about? He said, well, I had to give another 400 million to the Giving Pledge or something. And I said, so that's good. And he said, you knew who that was, don't you? And I said, no. He said, that was Bill Gates and Jennifer, blah, 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 his personal doctor. And I said, well, why didn't you tell me that? He said, would have made a difference. He said, it probably would have made you more nervous. I said, yeah, you're probably right. So, I've had a lot of beautiful people reach out. Blessed. Reach out. I opened my little checkbook and did my best and just kept paying for things. Like even that daratumumab drug at one stage for 6 months, it cost me $10,000 a week. Swipe your card every week for 6 months before it started getting more on the government, and I had it once a month, blah, blah, blah. But, like, you know, I just threw everything at it. You know, I'm a strong guy, a focused guy, and, you know, my will, you know, belies my actual ability. And I did my best. And 6.5 years later, I'm still here and I'm getting stronger. And I'm at probably 8/10 of what I was. And within 6 months, I'll be 9/10, so on. And, you know, I'm not so much of a fatty anymore. So,
but you actually look much more healthy now.
Yeah.
But you actually look a lot better than you did when I last saw you. When I talked about that lunch, but I mean, that was scary when I saw you because I'm like, oh my God, what's happened to him? But you do look like you're in good shape. I just want to finish off on two things. One, I see you often here with your dad, Michael. You're very close to your family. Like it's a beautiful sort of relationship that I see with your dad all the time.
Yeah.
Just quickly tell me about how important is it to have your support group like that?
Mark, I mean, you know the drill, right? Lebanese family, all the rest of it. Mum's English, Irish, dad's Lebanese. I'm a mongrel. But, you know, that's it. Number one, number two, number three is family. And dad's and mum has been right by my side. You know the drill, unfortunately, you know, God bless you. You lost your dad not long ago. And to me, it's everything. You know, we are very family-orientated people. You know, my parents, when I got unwell, you know, mum and dad have been based in the Gold Coast. They come and live with us in my home at the moment. And I'm building a new home, which is a mistake. But anyway, building a new home in Bellevue Hill in Sydney, but I'm renting a home and they come and live with us in home to make sure that I'm okay.
Could you also mind just, do you want to expand on the other challenge you have at the moment?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, and my wife, next thing you know, my wife's actually very ill as well. So she has breast cancer, stage 4 breast cancer. So you can imagine the hell we're going through with that. And she's had that for the last couple of years. And once again, we're throwing everything at it. We're trying to reinvent the rule book, but that's been extraordinarily tough. So it's amazing, you know, the guy upstairs gives you a lot of presents and a lot of good things, you know, a lot of rainbows. And he also gives you a lot of bloody challenges. And so I've had my fair share of wins and I've got my fair share of absolute challenges with myself and now with my wife. So thank goodness I've got a beautiful 4.5-year-old daughter that keeps you absolutely focused. But it's bloody tough. It's real tough.
Yeah. So what do you feel, given that you had people who reached out to you and helped you, how does that make you feel when you hear somebody else is doing it tough? And it could be just somebody you know from your growing up days. Do you feel as though you got to pay forward? Do you get that sense? Because I have to, I'm going to tell everybody this. When my dad was first admitted into hospital earlier this year, James actually generously texted me. Then he sent me a few texts about saying, mate, is there anything I can do? Because you obviously you're very connected to your family as well. The whole group of you are very connected to the Garvan Institute, which is a cancer institute. And also, I mean, you guys have donated a lot of money to them as well. And you generously offered to help my dad if there was any need for help, because my dad was at St. Vincent's. And fortunately, I'm in a position I didn't need that help, but it was a very generous thing. That sense of paying forward for what you've received is a pretty important factor. And it's one of the factors that people who are successful must accept, must recognize. If you've had some luck and someone else is not having luck, paying that forward is extraordinarily important. How do you feel about that as a concept?
So I was always empathetic with people, but becoming as ill as I was, my wife being as ill as she is, you take it up a notch or 10 in one hit. And so I'm very conscious of people around me, very conscious of people that are unwell or doing tough around us. And even, like, to be perfectly honest, the days of Aussie, John used to drill us, and John used to have a massive passion of wanting to get mums and dads with a roof over their head. And John had this view of, you know, this off the track a little bit, a view of, you know, you keep the household together, you keep the family together, you keep them under the roof, and you know what? Things are so much better. They don't go running around on the streets. They're not into drugs. They're not in, like, he was huge onto that, you know. And look, with us, I was always very empathetic, but today, and even feeling myself go through what I felt, it's interesting the people that visit you. It's interesting the people that reach out with a hand. It's interesting the people that you just wouldn't expect. Like I remember being in hospital and I did 110 nights at St. Vincent's Hospital alone, let alone from the US to Gold Coast or whatever. 110 nights. It's a lot of time in a hospital, right? You've got to train your brain. But even people like Ian and Rev, we spoke about Ian before, Ian would just come with him and just come and sit down with me and have a chat. Mate, as the CEO of the Commonwealth Bank, I mean, he's got better things to do than that. I mean, so it's interesting watching the people that would reach out and that would absolutely give a shit. And they might do the smallest thing. And so today I look at my behaviors and what I'm doing when someone is unwell or going through a tough time. And I'm hoping each time that appropriately I reach out to them. And if they can't do anything, fine, but let me offer it, you know, and whether it's physically helping them, whether it's writing them out a check. You know, even with, you talk about St. Vincent's, I'm so beholden to St. Vincent's that, you know, a couple of years ago, they came to me and we created this beautiful relationship with Harvard, which is Dana-Farber and St. Vincent's, and they wanted a tighter, and they wanted to create a program for a tighter relationship, and they wanted a couple of bucks. And so, you know, they came to me for a couple of dollars, and actually it was funny because my oncologist had a big problem with giving me his mobile phone number. Wouldn't give me his mobile phone number. Anyway, so at the time they wanted a check from me and I said, yep, I've got one condition. They said, what? And I said, they wanted $1 million. So I said, fine, there's $1 million, done. You can have the check if I get his phone number. So
and it worked.
It worked, yeah. I got the oncologist's personal phone number and used it a couple of times, but cost me a couple of commas.
As Kerry would always say, everybody's got their price.
That's it.
And I just want to finish off with one thing, and to any mortgage brokers who might be listening to this. I think something that is glaringly obvious to me in listening to James today is that the same passion, and it's a bit of a weird word to use, but love that you have of people in terms of wanting to help people, actually assist them in whatever their outcome is that they need to achieve, particularly where they're not in a position of strength or power to negotiate. The sort of stuff that you're talking about that you do with people you see and like to help. That is exactly the same thought process you've got to have as a broker in relation to your consumer customer. Your job, which is what you guys did at Aussie 20 years ago, from 30 years ago to more recently, that same thought process that you guys had in those days is exactly the same thought process you were just describing when you see someone you want to reach out to. It's the same deal. It's not just empathy or recognizing something, but it's actually really genuinely wanting to help because you can.
It's got to be in your bones. And you know what? I used to say forever, you know, I never differentiated between business and pleasure. What I did was a way of life, you know, and that was so important to me. You know, if you're a mortgage broker, a real estate agent or whatever, and if you think it's a job, you need to go elsewhere. This is a way of life. You know, getting to know your customers, getting to get your knowledge base to a certain level, getting to have the right systems and processes, always improving yourself and establishing a personal and a business brand. It's a way of life, you know, and if you're not committed to that, good real estate agents will see bad times, good brokers, good insurance, all the bad times, good. They'll always do well. Because they do the same things. They stay very focused. They do it at a very high level. They have passion. You know, the people that come and go out of the industry, the whingers, the whiners, the people that are half committed, don't want to, you know what? Good luck. It's a lucky dip. But even through these times, and they're more challenging times for agents, for mortgage brokers, for, you know, hospitality. If you're good at what you do, yeah, you've got to have the right systems and process. But if you're passionate, you work bloody hard and good at what you do, 9 times out of 10, that will see you through. Full stop.
And you'll make it.
Absolutely. Full stop. You know, and it's like in hospitality and, you know, the poor buggers a lot of them doing it very tough. And I know some great people in hospitality, the guys downstairs who run a hole in the wall, and they do very, very well. They know what they do. They stick to their knitting. You know, they work bloody hard. They know their customer.
But they love what they do.
They love what they do. You know, it is hard, but it's not that hard.
But it's not impossible. And you've turned out to be one of the great survivors, not only surviving all those tough years in the early years of Aussie Home Loans, trying to get it up and running as an annuity business, but also you've survived personal challenges yourself, and now you're assisting your wife get through those challenges. And obviously you got the challenges with your daughter too, because she's probably wondering where the hell's mum, what's going on. But ultimately, you and John at the forefront of what I would consider to be Australia's, at least in my experience, first true, what everyone talks about, but very few ever do, disruptors.
Yeah, the word disruptor is bandied around so much.
This is a true disruption. You were a true disruptor.
And we didn't know what the word meant, disruptor.
We didn't know we were even around then.
We didn't know we were disrupting.
Yeah.
We're just doing our best.
But you were true disruptors.
We look back, and as people say, we were, which was a lovely thing to say, I think.
But true disruptor. And James Symons, thanks very much for coming in. By the way, I wish you and your wife and your family.
Thank you, Mark.
The broader family, right through to John and Michael, everybody, the very best, mate.
Thank you, Mark. Good on you. Great to see you.